Hello, everybody. Today we are doing an artist hangout. Kick back, relax, and let's talk some nerdy art topics. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't afford an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof: critiques, tutorials, and professional development. We've got some big changes on the horizon, and maybe some of you have started to see some of those changes coming up. Most notably, we have started producing new content of different lengths. For example, you have probably seen some of these 15-second shorts that we've been pulling from some of the more, how should we say, entertaining moments of our live stream sport, Jordan, and this horrible art commission client that he had. You'll have to check out these shorts because YouTube Shorts is a new feature that they are implementing, I guess, to compete with TikTok. Let me know who here has watched some of these shorts. They're not really on a regular schedule yet because I'm trying to, number one, figure out how to do it because there's all sorts of tech things that I need to figure out, but I'm working on it. So you're going to see things creep in, and you are going to find that starting in June, we're going to have a big overhaul of the schedule, of the content. Right now, I'm just testing the waters a little bit, and then we'll settle in to something a little bit more consistent in June. So I hope you don't all mind being my guinea pigs, because I don't have enough guinea pigs between Jub, Wheat, and Fluffy. And tell me, as Ron Nook is saying, I've watched all the shorts. If you've seen the shorts, do you like them? Are they too long? Do we need to change the content of them? Because this is one ongoing experiment. I mean, Art Prof has always been one ongoing experiment. This is not new. But I really think that you can't rest on your laurels as an artist. And while I'm so pleased and lucky to have what we've accomplished as a community, as a staff, I always think we can do better. I don't want to just say, hey, that's good enough. You have to keep growing with the platform. You have to grow with your audience's needs. You have to change with social media. That's a given. And I think we were due for an overhaul for a little while. My Hika says, oh my God, that Hugh Jackman, an anatomy short, I cannot handle. If all anatomy classes were like that, I would never miss a class. Also, you wouldn't learn very much. Like, it would just be me going, this scene, it never gets old. I actually like him better here. He's a little bit more lean. He gets a little bit too bulgy. I mean, it's fine. Like, I'm being very picky here, but oh my God. But maybe that's because it was my first exposure to Wolverine. That was such a long time ago. That was like 20 years ago. Oh my God. It's really, really been a long time. Cool. We have a lot of people joining who usually can't join us live, obviously because of the time zone. But we have Australia. I believe I saw somebody else from France. Jurek Ann is here from France. And I believe we also have Victor from Germany. So thank you so much for joining us. And it's nice to have a hangout during a time that people can just chill. Because you know what? I really like it when the stream takes 30 minutes to prepare. Some of these anatomy streams, oh, I love making them, but sometimes they just kill me. Like making all those charts and diagrams. Because you know what? I can't do anything that's sourced out. Of course, I have to make diagrams. It takes way longer, but I do think ultimately the quality is better because then I'm customizing the content exactly the way I want it. Because inevitably, when I look at those diagrams online, there's always something wrong with them. Like, I don't like the color, or the font is ugly. I don't know. I'm a perfectionist. Shrina says, I'm from India. I really want to go to RISD, but it's too expensive. You know what, Shrina? RISD has changed. It's not the same school that it was 20 years ago. I'm just going to leave it at that. You can interpret that how you want. And you know something, I know a lot of students recently have gone through the whole college admissions and acceptance process. And what I will tell you, those of you who went through that, or maybe you're going to be applying fairly soon, the school that you go to, it does not define who you are. I know somebody who did not get into their number one college, and they were so great and wonderful that I said to them, listen, you're going to be great no matter where you are. It does not matter. It really is in your hands. I mean, there are things that I think are out of your hands, of course, but there's a lot that's in your hands. So don't ever tell yourself that the school is going to define who you are. It does not. And in fact, sometimes a more prestigious school can get in the way. I would read, there's a wonderful book by Frank Bruni. I'll write his name in the chat. Frank Bruni, who is a New York Times columnist. I can't remember the exact name, but it's something like Where You Go Is Not Who You Are. It's a short read, and he's so smart about the way he talks about it. We're on TikTok. My 13-year-old is cringing. She said to me this morning, she's like, why are you on TikTok? We can't ignore the short format content anymore. I kept telling myself for the longest time, oh, Clara, you do not have the headspace for this. And I probably don't, because learning TikTok and it really is like learning another language. I feel like I'm in Russian 1, but it's becoming clear with Gen Z that this is not something we can stay off of, especially because all the other platforms like Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, they're all becoming these copies of TikTok. And I'm realizing that, yeah, we can't not do this anymore. Thank you so much, Solivagant Hair. Clara, I think you're doing great. Keep up the good work. Don't forget to take care of yourself. Well, thank you so much. I try. It's not easy because I'm one of those people. There's always something for me to do, and I like staying busy. That's part of me trying to manage my energy, because honestly, I have too much of it, and it's a problem for me. I know it sounds weird because you would think, oh, if you have more energy, that's better, but it's not necessarily. Like, I have a lot of trouble sleeping, and a lot of it's because sometimes I go to bed and my mind is racing and I want to do things, but obviously my body doesn't really like that very much. Wow, Sergio is here from Romania. Very cool. And Trina says, but a great school gives more opportunities and jobs. Not necessarily. You would be surprised that actually, I know a lot of people who went to like Harvard and really didn't do anything. And actually, one of my friends went to Harvard. She said that Harvard actually does not care that much about their undergraduates. They're very invested in their graduate programs. And actually, a lot of the classes are not taught by professors. A lot of them are taught by grad students. And so it's not always the best experience. I think that just people assume, oh, across the board, if it's prestigious, I must be able to do well. I will get a good job. Nothing is guaranteed. I mean, you can go to a school that's less prestigious and do very well. There's a lot of people who have done that. We also have new 10-minute videos because you guys were so helpful. I got great advice and feedback in the YouTube community feed. And I didn't even realize this. I mean, I can't see the forest for the trees. I think you all know this. I need other people who are smarter to tell me exactly what to do. But a lot of people were saying, hey, listen, I really like your content, but I just don't have time to commit to a 1-hour live stream. And is there a way you can sum it up in more like a 10-minute video or so? And so I did release one video, how to draw hands, about 10 minutes long. And really, it's like these two streams had a baby. That's what I did, is I took the most succinct parts of the lecture and I merged it with footage of me drawing the hands. So that way you can get the boiled down version. And then if you want something a little bit more in depth, you can watch both streams later on, because there is stuff in those streams that's not in the 10-minute version, obviously, and I do go deeper. But for those of you full-time jobs, you got kids and stuff like that, I'm hoping this gives you more opportunities to sink into the material. Ewan says, could you delegate the TikTok responsibilities to someone else? It's a lot harder than it sounds. I mean, a lot of people will volunteer to intern, and that's very kind of them, but interns are work. Tell me in the chat, who here has ever supervised interns? It's work. And honestly, a lot of the times I've had interns that make me work harder, where it gets to the point where I'm like, oh, I might as well have just done it myself. It would have taken less time than to train somebody. So it sounds simple to just give it to somebody, but it's like you really do have to train people. And then the other issue is if you want somebody who don't have to train, you have to pay them, because that's the way it works. And we have such a small budget. We're barely scraping by. I just can't make the space for that right now, unfortunately. Yeah, Seven Angelic says the effort to teach someone is sometimes more work than the work. Yeah, a couple years ago, I used to hire like teams of interns. And I was thinking at the time, oh, this will be great. I'll have all these people who can help me with stuff. It was so much work to supervise them. And oftentimes, because they're inexperienced, I mean, understandably so, they would mess up. And then I have to go clean up the mess. And that would take double the amount of time than if I just did it myself. I mean, I would hope that at some point I can delegate and not have to do that, but it's tricky. It's not as easy as it sounds. W315 says, I saw the hands one. That's a nice quick reference to go back to for a refresher. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, so even if you've watched the live streams, sometimes you need a little review before the pop quiz, except there's no pop quiz, which is awesome. I've done grading papers. I'm so happy I don't have to do that right now. Yeah, Bia says 10-minute video is great for repetition on busy days. I mean, I can't rely on how I watch YouTube because I'm a weird YouTube user. The only time I'm on YouTube is if I'm cooking and I'm like, how do I cut an artichoke? And I have to look up a video on that. And other than that, and listening to people that give you tips on YouTube, I really don't listen to it. So I can't gauge any of your viewing habits based on mine because it's totally inaccurate. Ned says, why do you think teaching technical skill in art school is becoming less and less of a thing? I honestly think a lot of it has to do with digital media, and I have a feeling things tend to swing back and forth in terms of trends in education. And I think right now, I mean, it's very exciting what you can do with technology. It's amazing. It blows my mind what people can do. But I think because people are so excited about that, they're forgetting what it means to use a hammer. Okay, who here knows how to use a drill? Tell me. Who here knows how to use a screwdriver? I mean, I think that a lot of the college students that I was getting at RISD, the freshmen and the sophomores, they were much more likely to know how to use Photoshop and Procreate than to know how to use a drill or a screwdriver. I mean, like, I don't think a lot of them knew the difference between a flat head and a Phillips head screwdriver. So I think what's going to happen, though, Ned, is people are going to do their thing with the digital. And the digital is always going to be going on because they're constantly making innovations and stuff like that. But I think there is going to be a swing back towards something a little bit more hands-on, and it'll just keep swinging. I mean, I think that's inevitable with any technology, because I think what happens is people get a little tired of the digital stuff and then they start yearning for the handmade. It's very interesting. Victor says, I'm a drill expert. It's hard to actually, the thing I have trouble with is when you're drilling a screw and it goes like that I have trouble with. I was never good at that. Drilling is easier. I don't have a trouble with that. Shrina says, how do some artists have their looks and features, have their own looks and features in their own illustrations, even though we only look at ourselves twice or thrice a day? I think that's really common. Oh, and when I was in art school, I hated that I would oftentimes do a portrait of the model in class or somebody else, and people would look at me and say, that looks like you. I'm like, who here has done that? Who here has done an image that was not supposed to be a self-portrait and then been told or looked at that image and go, oh my gosh, that looks like me? I mean, I think you know yourself the best. And even if you're actively trying to avoid mirrors, maybe you're a vampire, maybe you are a vampire, it's still really hard to get away from that. I think it's very common. Oh, Paula F says, we had a unit on basic woodworking in 3rd grade. Wow, that is a brave woodworking teacher. I don't know that I want to teach 3rd graders. It's really hard. Oh, cool. Bia says, I'm an electrician and electrical engineer. Screwdrivers and drills are normal to me. Everyone who gets to know me is surprised I can draw, even though I am from a technical field. Really? I feel that there's so much relationship there, because anybody that like actively physically works with their hands, it's like there's a certain muscle memory in there. I mean, back when I was playing oboe regularly, I had to make reeds all the time. And I remember my teacher was like, wow, you're really good at this. I mean, the carving part, not making a good reed. But like, I didn't have trouble figuring out how to use the knife. And I think she was used to having students who just could not navigate a knife at all. And I think it's just the physicality of it. Jurek says, in France nowadays, fine art schools teach you to speak about your art more than to do your art. Oh, that's really common. I know. I mean, oh dear, the number of, I'm sorry, just total BS that I would hear in art school, like just people puffing themselves up. And I'm like, oh, really? I mean, I don't know. I used to buy into some of that when I was trying to, oh, hello, Justin Thoreau and John Slattery. In case you missed this, they're my second tier of hot white men. And they look exactly the same, like John Slattery is totally 30 years older. Justin Thoreau. So this is what Justin Thoreau is going to look like when he's 60. But anyway, I think when I was trying to really fit into that gallery world, I really was trying to push that. But now I'm like, oh, I'm so over that. Like, just give me plain, boring language any day of the week. And I tell my staff that. Like, when I've had to train people, oh, that's a creepy image, to be on streams, literally, I will say to people, please pretend you're talking to an 8-year-old. And I don't want to hear super artsy fartsy words so you can try to sound smart, because if it's not accessible, it's not smart. Ariel says, you play the oboe. Yeah, I was hardcore. Like, I went to oboe camp and I was in a youth orchestra. I played with the Brown University Orchestra. I had a solo recital at Brown when I was a senior. And actually, there's a stream where I pick up my oboe for the first time in like 10 years. It's in the raffle stream if you want to go find it. Oh, it's horrific. I'm going to have to practice and actually show you what I really can sound like, but it would take me a little while. And Sonnet says, I got a bachelor's in nursing, money grab job. Could I get into an MFA program? Would you recommend getting some foundation in art first, like what you'd get in a BFA? It's definitely not going to hurt you. I mean, I think a lot of people worry. They say, oh, well, I didn't go to art school. I didn't get a BFA. My degree is in something else. To be honest, I actually think that makes you more interesting, because the people that come out of art school who want to go to an MFA, I mean, they're a dime a dozen. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. There's high numbers of people who want to go. If you're worried that, oh, I'm needing some foundation stuff, I really don't feel that prepared, an option you could consider is a post-baccalaureate program. There are not that many of them. I know that School and Museum of Fine Arts, where I used to teach, they have a post-bac program. So does Brandeis University in Massachusetts. And generally speaking, the post-bac program, it's like a 1-year program. And most of the time, it's seen as a bridge to an MFA program. So you have a little bit of time to prepare your work. So that's something you could think about. But of course, I mean, that's another program that you'd have to enroll in. But we do have a lot of streams on MFA programs and how to prepare a portfolio. So I would watch those and make sure that you have all the information, because I think the thing about MFAs that's tricky, people don't have the information. And the information that's out there on MFAs is not that reliable, or if it's out there, it's really vague. So I'm hoping that our videos have the specificity that will help you get started. WC says, can we please do a stream where you make a tier list of your hot white men? I feel like I need to make a chart. Well, because I can't figure out where Eddie Redmayne fits. Because when I like him, I really like him. But I don't think about him all the time. Maybe he's in between. Maybe he's like almost in the top tier. He's in between that. And see, John Slattery and Justin Thoreau, who I just showed you, they're like tier 2. Maybe there's a tier 3. Well, because, oh, no. Maybe it's a wait list. Because, okay, you know how Deepti has the hots for Dev Patel? I'm thinking about him. We have to watch him in a movie. Somebody was telling me to watch Lion because he's got nice long hair. But I need to watch him in something where he has long hair and facial hair, because I saw him in Slumdog Millionaire. He's not supposed to be hot in that movie. So he's on the wait list. I don't know. We'll see. Seven Angelic says a flow chart. Oh, a Venn diagram. Okay. All right. We'll see what works. W315 says, do a stream where you play oboe and we react with painting. That's really funny. Jeez, you guys really want to hear me? Okay, if I play oboe again on this, I'm going to practice, because I was really good a long time ago. I used to practice like 2 hours every day, but I don't have time for that now. Super 60s says, I played the oboe in junior high and high school. Whoa! I don't meet a lot of oboe players. I mean, there are not a lot of us out there. Corey says, I didn't know you could do an MFA without having a bachelor's in it. I always thought it was like doing a master's in medicine or law. It's really not. It's so different. And honestly, I think the whole MFA program system, I think it's a little bit messed up, because there's so few openings. I mean, most MFA programs, it's like 5 students. And the big ones have like 10. And so the numbers are just not there. And yet the numbers of people who are going and wanting to get a degree is incredibly high. And then you have all these people coming out with the degrees who can't get jobs in academia. So it's not a very good system. And so if any of you are thinking about an MFA, just really make sure you do the research, because it's not always the best fit. And there's so many other options that are not going to cost you $70,000 in the US. You could do an artist residency. I mean, some artist residencies are fully funded, and sometimes people just need time to work. I mean, it is nice to be in a program where you're not working full time, but yeah, it's a major financial investment. Shrina says, Dev Patel is such a great actor. But see, here's the thing. If I add Dev Patel, I can't call them my hot white men anymore. It's just my hot men. And I don't want to disappoint anybody. W315 says, I don't understand about residencies. Is it just where you get a space and resources and do your own thing, or are there residencies where you get instruction? Usually there's no instruction. Usually you're really left to your own devices. The thing I will say about residencies is you really need to do your research, because there are some residencies where you're basically paying for the whole thing and they do almost nothing for you. You got to watch out for that. There's other like sweet resident, like the Rome Prize. That is a sweet residency. I mean, there's some where they practically pay you to be at the residency, but as you can imagine, they're terribly competitive. And it also depends on the community too, because there are certain residencies, like I would say the McDowell Colony is one of them, where it really is about the community. Because the thing about the McDowell Colony is that it is not just visual artists. There's writers, composers, all types of different people. And then there's other ones where it's just visual artists. And there's other residencies where you're just holed up in your studio and you're not really talking to anybody. But from what I've seen and heard about the McDowell Colony, that's not the case, that you really get to connect with the other artists. And that's one of the gigantic advantages of being in a residency. Ned says, what about skipping the BFA, just doing your MFA when you've built the skills up on your own? You can. I mean, you need to have an undergrad degree. Check with the school. I don't know the exact requirements, but I think that's usually the assumption, is that you need to have some undergrad degree. Tali says, can you be self-taught in printmaking, or do you need to take a class for that? You can do it with a limited number of techniques, but if you want to do anything that involves acid, nitric acid or ferric chloride is actually the better option today. You have to have a facility. I guess you could try to self-teach, but you know something? The only resource for printmaking that I know that's really comprehensive and reliable is a book, which is like not that helpful. I don't know, maybe there are YouTube channels, but I haven't seen one that for me could replace a printmaking class, because I mean, printmaking's hard. Etching is really hard. It takes a long time to figure out how to do it. So you can, I mean, we have a lot of printmaking tutorials here that don't involve any acid at all. And a lot of those you can totally do at home, like jelly plates and trace monotypes. I did the jelly plate image transfer technique recently, but there's a limit. I mean, especially like lithography, like you cannot do lithography without a studio. And it's not recommended to use nitric or ferric chloride at home. It's just too dangerous. So you can do it, but there's a limit to how much you can do. A tree says, currently doing my BFA, haven't planned anything yet about the MFA. Don't really know how important the MFA really is after the BFA. The only situation where you must have an MFA is if you want to teach college. Everything else doesn't matter. For example, if you want to show in a gallery, they don't care. They just care about the work. If you want to work as a freelance illustrator, again, they do not care. Academia is the only place where it matters. And I think you all know what I think about academia. If you don't know, look up Art Prof Why I Left RISD, and you will hear the blood, sweat, and tears and the total dirt on what I think about academia right now. W315 says, wouldn't a residency with a community and studio be worth paying for? It might. It really, really depends, because I've definitely talked to people who went on residencies and were like, it wasn't that great. I've had other people come back and say, oh my God, it was amazing. It's just that I think, unlike grants, which, I mean, you get money. Like, what version of that is bad? A residency, it can drain your finances if you don't get one that covers all those things. So Mahika is asking, what's a residency? So that's basically a situation where you go to some location. Sometimes they provide a studio and you're there for a certain amount of time. They vary tremendously. I mean, there are residencies as a week. There are some, the Rome Prize is a year. There are some that are 2 months. And so they really, really vary. If you go to artprof.org and you click under art resources, we do have a link at the top for artist residencies, and you can click onto the various websites and see what all of those versions really are. Ariel says, always wanted to do intaglio, but it looks so complex. It is. It's really hard. Because when I was at RISD, I took a winter session class, which is only 6 weeks. And we did etching, and we had class twice a week for 7 hours, so like 14 hours a week, okay? It was so stressful because there were so many techniques to go over. And the teacher was a grad student. I'm sorry, they weren't very good. Didn't really know what they were doing. They were not very thorough. And I was lost. I mean, they were introducing a new technique every day. So we did line etching, dry point, soft ground, aquatint. And then there's like variations, like there are many different versions of aquatint. You can do spray paint aquatint, aquatint with rosin, sugar lift. I mean, it was too much, and much less to actually do it well. I mean, I felt like I barely skimmed the surface, and that was 14 hours a week for 6 weeks. Granted, it was sort of like a crash course, but it took me a long time to feel comfortable in intaglio. W315 says, if I were in a city, I would check out maker spaces. I think there are some that have setups for art. Depends on the city. I mean, when I was in Boston, there were a lot of print shops, and it was great, but they're not cheap. I mean, for good reason. Maintaining a print shop is hard. It's expensive, and you need very specialized staff. I mean, I do not envy anybody who runs an independent print shop. I mean, it's almost like community service. It's that hard. But the thing is, they're not going to teach you. Like, you basically rent out time. Like, you say, okay, I have 2 days a week, and I'm going to use the litho. I mean, I guess if you took a workshop, it is hard. The training is so rigorous for printmaking. Like, if you're going to be comprehensive, like litho, etching, silk screen, relief, if you're going to do all those things, that takes a long time. It's not easy to do. Seven Angelic says, I had a friend that did a touring residency. Each place was different for her. Some good, some meh. Yeah, it's just with residencies, you just never know. Like, the range is just so broad that you're not always guaranteed to have a good experience. Seven Angelic says, sugar lift. Don't even make me try to explain it. It's so confusing. Like, it's one of those techniques. It's like the elimination process with linoleum, but worse. Every time I have taught sugar lift, and I've tried to be so thorough, the students are like, what? Trust me, it'll make sense. Once we get through these 20 steps, it will make sense. So what happens is you do the whole demo and they're totally confused until like the last step. And so inevitably you have to do the demo like 3 more times. It's really hard, but it's cool. And I have a bunch of sugar lifts. It's actually a technique, you use it with aquatint. And it literally is sugar, and you literally lift. It's awesome, actually. I really like it. Because what you end up doing is you take India ink and you mix sugar into it, and it makes it a little goopy, and I'm not even going to get into it. We need a 2-hour stream. Nat says, do you think New York City is the place to go to make it? Depends on what you want to do. If you want to be a freelance illustrator, you don't need to live in New York City. That was not the case. In the 80s, you had to live in New York because you had to cart around a physical portfolio to visit all the art directors in their offices. Now you could live in Antarctica. And if you have a good internet connection and a computer and laptop, you totally would be fine. I mean, I don't know why you'd want to live in Antarctica. I don't know, maybe because of the penguins. But I think if you want to be in the New York gallery art scene, it probably is important. But the thing is, that's a really specific field. It's a tiny little club, and it's very hard to break into. I just think that nowadays, especially now with the pandemic, people have discovered that, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things we don't have to do in person. I just think it's becoming less and less important. And actually, I'm telling a lot of students now, because the whole RISD thing, art school thing, is to move to New York or San Francisco right afterwards, because people think they have to go there to make it. But you know something? I've had some students who did that who had a terrible experience. I had this one student, she moved to New York, she was a painting major, and she really felt she had to go. New York is so expensive. Oh my God, I cannot believe how expensive it is to live there. I mean, you get an apartment that's like a closet. It costs as much as my house in Utah. And she did an unpaid internship at a New York City swanky gallery. And then eventually she ran out of money and ended up working at a beauty salon for a little while. And then eventually really ran out of money and had to go back home to Korea. And she said to me later, Clara, that was the biggest waste of time, because the only thing that I came out from that experience, I got a letter of recommendation from the gallery that said, this student is a very good intern. They did a good job filing papers. That was it. That's not everybody's story, but the stories about people making it, I mean, that's like basically like saying I want to be Brad Pitt. It does not happen to that many people. And we have a question here. Seven Angelic, is actual sugar involved? Yeah, it's so funny. Like, these terms actually make a lot of sense. W315 is going to go mix it. Well, it's not going to work, though, because part of it involves putting on the rosin and letting the sugar dissolve in a soaked bath so it will lift up. I'm not even going to go there. Christine says, oh my God, all this intaglio stuff sounds like complete gibberish to me. I have so much to learn about traditional art. You know what? The technique does not matter unless you're actually going to be a professional printmaker. It's not something you have to learn how to do. I love it. I'm a gigantic printmaking nerd, but I was very lucky that I had the education to be able to learn how to do that. And one of my mentors is a printmaker. And so I think my relationship with him really cemented my desire to be a printmaker. And I really think if he wasn't a printmaker, I'm not so sure I would have pushed so hard for it. Because you know what's funny about printmaking? It's the one area of mine, I have no degree in printmaking at all. Like, if you look at my resume, you would never know that I have experience in printmaking. Like, I have a degree in sculpture, a degree in illustration, although I don't do illustration. So yes, my resume is actually not very reflective of my experiences. Seven Angelic says, actually, could we learn something on cyanotype? I actually don't know how to do cyanotype, and I feel like I should. See, I just feel like an idiot. Like, I never took a photography class, and I just do the idiot's version of photography, and it makes me mad because I do a lot of photography for Art Prof now, and I really, really wish I'd taken like just a basics photo class so I could just understand what my camera's doing on automatic. I just feel like a total moron. Artist Zena says, less equipment needed, renting a press after making plates the cheapest. You know something? I had this baby press that I bought from Blick a long time ago. I bought it in like 1999, and it cost $500. It was very small. I think the widest it printed was like 12 inches, and the widest was 20. And I just had it in my living room, and I made dry points. Because with dry point, you don't need solvents. With dry point, you can use oil-based ink, but you can use baby oil to clean up. It was great. I made a lot of dry points during that time. And then, oh my God, I wanted to cry when this happened. So I brought it in to use for my RISD Project Open Door class because they made these awesome linoleum block prints. And I really wanted to do them at press because they just look so much better. And oh my God, I had a student who bumped it and it fell on the floor and broke, which is incredible because that thing was like steel. I just wanted to cry because I had that press for like 20 years. I mean, it's not his fault. He didn't mean to do it, but it made me really sad because that was my like baby press from a long time ago. Dill Pickle says, what do people really mean by, quote, making it in the art world? It depends on who you are. I mean, some people would say, oh, well, I want to be in Juxtaposed magazine. And that's their idea of making it. Some people say, I want to win a MacArthur Foundation grant. Some people say, I want to be in the Venice Biennale. Or I want to do public art and make a mosaic in a New York City subway station. Other people want to be a children's book illustrator. Everybody has a different definition of that. I'm sort of over making it. I mean, I totally wanted to do all those things. Like, I wanted to be in those white cube galleries that were all, you know, high up and above. And I'm so over it. Like, it's just not, I'm just not interested in that anymore. Rachel says, exposure can come from a lot of places. It all depends on how you present yourself, especially if you're living in a completely different place. Going to New York seems like a waste of time. It can be. I mean, New York is exciting. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I lived there for 2 years because of grad school. And what I loved about it, I met people from everywhere. All my friends were from a foreign country. It was the coolest thing. And the other cool thing about New York, if you're in New York, tell me if this has happened to you. Everybody wanted to crash at our apartment. Like everybody, like family, friends, minor acquaintances. I'm stopping through New York. Can I stay with you? It's great. We saw people all the time. I mean, now in Utah, we're not really doing that. People don't pass through Utah all the time, but it was really, really fun. It was just a great life experience that I really enjoyed. Chibbles says, I've always wanted to learn printmaking, but never had the opportunity in art school. What we suggest are necessary materials to start out. You know what, Chibbles? I would start with art printmaking tutorials. I just did one on image transfers. I did one before that. That was on trace monotypes. And we also have another one, which is like a wipe away technique with a jelly plate. We also have rubber stamps and linoleum block printmaking. Those are all printmaking processes that you can do at home. You do have to get the supplies. I mean, it's a lot of supplies. It's the type of thing you can't wing it. Like you have to get a brayer. You can't not have a brayer. But we do have a lot of information. Like usually in the YouTube video description, we will list all the supplies that you need for that particular tutorial. But I would run through those. And if you catch the printmaking bug, then maybe research into taking a class somewhere, because I really do think for the complicated acid versions, I just don't recommend anybody trying to learn that on your own. Liz Brenneman says, how do you know when you're, quote, ready for a big project like a tarot deck? You should watch the stream that I did with Mia Rozier. She does all the YouTube comments. Probably a lot of you have gotten comments from her on Instagram and YouTube. And she walks through the whole process of making her tarot deck. She did like 78 images, which is insane. And then ran a successful Kickstarter campaign. So she's going to have those printed, like nice printed decks, and people who pledge to the Kickstarter are going to get one. And also she's going to have them for sale on her site. So definitely watch that. But I think you just got to try it. Try it for like a month. Like give yourself a short period of time, but not so short that you can give up really fast. Like I think a month is pretty good. Get started. And if you find yourself just like so overwhelmed, maybe that's not the right time. But if you do it for a month and you're like, oh my God, I really, really like this, keep going. Because you know something, Mia's project, it wasn't intended to be a big project. She actually is a student at RISD right now, and she has all these class assignments, and the tarot deck was just for herself. And it was funny because she said to me, oh yeah, I would work on the tarot deck when I didn't feel like doing my assignments and I just wanted to do something fun. So sometimes that, quote, big project, it doesn't have to feel like a big project. And oftentimes it's these things that we just do maybe to relax or blow off some steam. And then we realize, wow, this is really fun. I could just keep doing this. So I think you just have to try it, Liz, because you can think all day about things, but you don't really know until you've actually tried it. And we have a comment here from Jane who says, I think I would just be happy to earn enough from my art to earn a living and support my family. I don't need to be famous. Yeah, like some people, that's not important. I'm not sure I want to be famous. I just want an empire, like Roman Empire. I mean, I don't want to like, slaughter half of Europe, but like, I just want my empire. I've got plans. But I guess having an empire, that probably involves being at least some level of visibility. I don't want to be like Hugh Jackman famous. Like that must be really hard. I don't want that in my life. Oh, you guys are so nice. With all the people you're helping, Clara, you've definitely made it. Anna says, Clara, you made it. You've got a school. It is kind of remarkable, especially when I think about the days when I just could not get anyone to listen to me. I mean, when I started the Kickstarter for Art Prof, people were just like, what? Like, this was before the pandemic. This is 2015. This is 6 years ago. And nobody had any idea what I was talking about. And I think with the pandemic, we've been able to step in to help a lot of people, which has been great. All right, so Sonnet says, to me, making it is getting my work in like the Met or something. Yeah, and it's like navigating museum collections. That's a whole other world than the commercial gallery system in New York. So there's commercial galleries in New York, and it's very swank, and a place like Gagosian or something like that. They sell artwork for thousands and thousands. There's also the auction block, Christie's and Sotheby's. If you want to make 69 million on an NFT and you're a Beeple, you can do that. The Met is different though. A museum collection goes through curators, and curators are entirely based on word of mouth. You don't get to apply to a curator. You don't even get to do that with a gallery. It's all word of mouth. I've never heard of somebody applying to a curator. You really have to be in those circles and have those connections. And it's hard. It's really, really hard to break in. W315 says, tell us what one of your artist calls is like. I'm not ready for a portfolio critique, but a call sounds more like it. Yeah, the artist calls are fun because it's one-on-one, can be with me or one of the staff, and we have rates on our site. I think artist calls are good because you can ask us a lot of questions, because the portfolio critique, it's recorded, it's a video. You don't get to talk to us. We just send you the video with the audio of our critique. But the artist call, I talked to somebody a couple months ago, and actually it was about an MFA because they were wondering, should I get an MFA? And we figured out at the end of the call that actually, based on what they wanted to do, that an MFA was not the best option. And I don't think that that would have come across very well if I had just sent them a portfolio critique, because I would have just talked about the work. I wouldn't have mentioned anything about their long-term goals. They couldn't have told me how things were going or what their goals were. And I think they started to realize after that that it wasn't what they thought it was. They had an idea of what they thought an MFA would do for them, and I was like, no, that's not what it is. So an artist call is good for stuff like that. Or like if people are making a life change, like I get a lot of questions, people who want to like take the leap to try to go full time, but they want to know what's actually involved. We have a lot of videos that will go over that. But the thing about the artist call is it's totally customized to you, because we can give advice on business and career development to a point. There's a limit, because then you start to isolate different audiences, which isn't always a good thing. But the consequence of that is that a lot of our career advice, it has to stay somewhat generic. And so that's what's tricky about that. Shrina is asking, here it is. Can an international student get an internship in the US? It depends on what type of internship. There are internships at animation studios. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. A lot of the internships I've seen with an artist, like a lot of people say, oh, I want to intern for a famous artist. First of all, they're not good jobs. They sound cool. Ooh, I'm an intern for this famous artist. But you know what? A lot of those jobs pay nothing if they pay. And you're doing total grunt work. I don't know anybody who has been an artist assistant who did anything that was remotely fun. It was like sanding this or stretching the canvas or doing their paperwork. And honestly, it doesn't really give you that much of a leg up. And I had another student who did an internship for a very well-known artist, and they said it was miserable. So I think it's similar to residencies, like the range of quality for internships, it's really, really broad. Like I had a student once, I ran into them over the summer and I said, oh, what are you doing? They're like, oh, I have this internship at this local museum. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. You got a museum internship. She's like, it's so bad, Clara. She said that most of the time she was just a security guard. So it like sounded good to say that she was an intern at this museum, but it was a bad job. Then again, there's other internships, like Pixar has an internship, but it's massively competitive. So Shrina, I would just say do your research and ask them what the situation is, because it varies tremendously. Christine says, eternally grateful you're making these videos for us, to be honest. It's such a wonderful community. I'd echo that starting Art Prof is, quote, making it. That's so nice, you guys, because I know from your point of view, it looks like, oh my gosh, we only have 100K subs. But there's always that little part of you that's like, I could be doing more. And yes, I'm always going to do that because I want to continue to grow and develop as an artist. But it's also hard because part of you feels like, oh my God, I should have gotten further by now. But most of the time I can X that little voice in my head. Mingus says, lost the comment. How do you feel about digital art, seemingly a mainly traditional artist? Do you find complicated, uncomfortable? Because I do. Also, do you feel like there's something missing? I think the way I would put it, if you're a traditional artist, well, if that's where the vast majority of your experience is, you can't think about digital art as being a substitute. You have to see it as its own beast. Because I think if you're constantly comparing it, not that you'll be disappointed, but you'll be frustrated. It's sort of like what I talked about with water mixable oils. So when I did those streams on water mixable oils, a lot of people would say to me, oh, well, how does this compare with regular oil paints? And I said to them, I don't really want to do that because I'm going to be frustrated that it's not oils. And if I just see it as its own category, I actually had an easier time with it. So I think a lot of it is just your mindset. Soyton Lee says, which half of Europe would I slaughter? Well, I mean, according to the Romans, it was everybody. They were hardcore. I mean, you got to respect the Romans. They were insane. Who here has been to the Pantheon in Rome? If you don't know about the Pantheon, it's this amazing building. And it's one of those buildings, I really was blown away by it. There's some buildings I went to in Europe and I was like, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. The Pantheon was better, but I thought it was going to be. They were insane. They like built this wooden structure on the top, which is this dome. Okay, and picture you have like rocks and sticks to build this stuff. You don't have like a circular saw or anything like that. And they poured concrete over this wood ceiling, and then they removed the wood. It's like, are you insane? Like, they were nuts. The stuff that they did, it was so ahead of their time. You got to really admire that, even though they killed like half the world. Izzy Green says, Art Prof rules. Lieu Dynasty. Oh, I like the way all of this sounds. W.C. Lee Art says, when people want to buy my art is when I know I have made it. Well, it's nice to have like a concrete goal. I just feel like for me, I mean, selling's never been important to me, so I'm a totally different category. But so much of the time people buy stuff and I'm like, really? Like a lot of the times they don't buy the work that I think is my best work. It's very strange. And sometimes I throw something on my shop, I'm like, no one's ever going to buy this, and then they buy it. It's very, very strange. I would give a shout out to RB Dick. Thank you so much for the super sticker. You are the ones that make this community what it is, and we literally would not be here without your support because we need your funds to stay alive. And I want to keep staying alive because it's a little precarious right now. We're still here, but yeah, it's not where I want it to be. Shrina says, being a young artist, I feel I have so much to do, so many people to meet, so much to learn, yet then I realize I might not get enough commissions to support myself. You know what I would suggest? This is good advice for everybody, including myself. I woke up this morning, I was like, I need to do this, I need to do that. And I just was like, Clara, you can't do this. This is not healthy. You got to do one thing at a time. You can't try to balance everything all at once. And it's okay to swing back and forth and to say, you know what, for this month, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to put that aside. There's no way any of us can do that and stay sane. Jasmine is asking, when you were at NYC, did you go to the Art Students League of New York? I did not, but I had a friend that had taken a lot of classes there, and she had skill. She was really good at casting, and, oh, she was one of my best friends. I had lunch with her every day, and, oh, I miss her so much now. I haven't talked to her in a long time. She's one of those people, these friends, tell me if you have this. You have these friends where you don't see them very often. It's almost like you're lucky if you get to see them once a year, and you don't really talk a lot or text or anything like that. But then when you see them, it's like no time passed. It's like you saw them yesterday. You just pick up from where you left off. I just love that about certain friendships. I mean, it bums me out that I can't see them more, but there aren't that many people in my life who I have that relationship with. So when you have it, it's really amazing. Bicycle Lady says, when is the next gouache paint along? Got my casein paint ready. Cool. I can't remember. It was supposed to be Thursday, but actually Alex had to back out of that stream. So we'll see when the next one is. But if you want to know, the schedule is on our main website. So you can definitely go check that out. Artemis says, never wanted to be famous, just notorious. I used to tell students, because at RISD, I taught there so long. I taught like over 1,000 students, that I used to say to students, listen, I'm going to remember your name for the semester, but beyond that, there are no guarantees. And they would be like, well, how do I get you to remember me? I'm like, you got to be extraordinarily amazing, or you got to pull something. You got to do some stunt that's so memorable, but that doesn't get you in trouble. So, oh gosh, one of my colleagues had a student who set a student's hair on fire in the middle of classes in college. Oh dear. Yeah, that's not a good stunt to take. Solivigant Hair says, does Art Prof have a mascot? I guess it's our guinea pigs. Jub Jub Wheat and Fluffy, although Fluffy's not doing very well. I don't know how much longer he's going to be around, but yeah, I guess that. C. Cantrell says, I think making it is always going on because the learning never stops. That is so true. I mean, I would never want the learning to stop. That would make me sad. And you do see people who do that, people who find a certain thing that works very well and is effective and marketable, and that's fine if that works for you. But I just know that I would get bored. That's in some way why I do respect Picasso, because, okay, confession, I don't really like his work that much. I understand his significance. I respect that. That's fine. But he's not really my cup of tea, okay? But what I do respect is that he kept experimenting. I mean, if you look at the stuff that he did at the end of his life, it was so all over the place. But I think that's awesome. I mean, he was so accomplished, and yet he was still pushing himself in that way. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Emily, who says, my art school summer breaks are fueled my Art Prof inspiration. Thank you, everyone in the community. Well, thank you so much, Emily. We greatly appreciate your support. You are all wonderful. Tolly says, is it possible to make your still life with sculpture if there's nothing that interests you? Oh, yes, absolutely. I do that all the time. Actually, I was going to do a stream on that last month, but it got bumped for something. But if you look at my series on my website called Wading, Wading, all of the crayon drawings, those were made from figure sculptures that I sculpted. It's a great way to draw it because you actually have to invent a lot. I actually made the sculptures very, very vague and unfinished because I wanted to manipulate it more from the drawing point of view. Stephen asks, do any of you do plein air? Yes, I did a whole bunch of tutorials. I have 2 right now from painting on site in Utah. And there's actually 2 more parts coming. I just haven't had a chance to edit them yet. And I also did a tutorial in Taiwan and also in China. And you can find those on our YouTube channel. And I love it. So much fun. Ned says, what is the most problematic student you've ever had to deal with at RISD? Oh, geez. I mean, I would never do a stream like this, but wow, that would take up several streams to explain all the stories. It's tricky because I think, I mean, there's people who are very straightforward, like they never come to class, they don't do the homework. I mean, in some ways that's easier because it's really complex. I mean, straightforward is like, you didn't come to class, you didn't do the homework. Duh. I mean, of course, that's pretty clear what's going on. I had a student who yelled at me once, like yelled top of their lungs in front of the class in a group critique. And I think they did some drawing where it was like super obvious they'd copied a photo, even though the assignment was to draw from life. It was like a picture of somebody lighting a cigarette and the lighter. I was like, dude, this is not from life. And so I called them out on it. Did not like it and shouted at me and said, that's the most insulting thing you could ever say to me. And I know that he was saying that to get under my skin. And so I just said, I think you and I should talk about this later. Let's move on to the next piece. He was so angry, just like fuming, like the steam was like, he was so mad because he wanted a reaction. He wanted me to yell back. And so I talked to him later and it was fine. So that was the most dramatic, like visible thing. But I have had students who would lie about stuff that I knew wasn't true. I mean, I've had students say that I bullied them. I've had all kinds of things. I mean, I think the thing that makes it hard is when they try to get the administration involved, and that's very sticky in academia. It's not fun. People want to know, was the fire on purpose? No, it was on purpose. It was not an accident. Oh, God. What compels you to want to do that? I have no idea. Gargi says, I've heard Lauren talk about color harmony and hierarchy. What is that? You're going to have to ask Lauren because I think that could be interpreted in a number of different ways, and I don't want to misrepresent. Lunija says, since that came up, I'm curious, who is the most impressive students? You know, Jordan was one of my most impressive students because I've said this to him in front of him, so this is not new to him. When Jordan came into my class, I mean, he was like 18 when I met him, freshman drawing. I was his first drawing class, had him in the fall semester, and he was not the most skilled student at all. I would have RISD students who came into class who were just rocking their skills. So good. Tons and tons of experience. And they totally rested on their laurels. Not all of them. Some of them worked really hard, which was fantastic. But there were a lot who did not want to hear a thing I had to say, at which point you're just like, why are you here? Like, why are you even in school if you don't want to listen to anybody? And so Jordan was not the most skilled student. And he knew it, and yet he worked so hard every week. Even when his work didn't pan out, he was so studious, and I was so impressed by how mature he was. And he was, I mean, you all know this. He's so kind and generous and easy to work with, and I just was blown away by his maturity, and he really knew what he wanted to do. And actually, RISD did not end up giving him the skill set he needed to do what he wants to do, which is to create his own animation show. And it was phenomenal. Because you know something? It's really easy when you are not a super skilled artist to get down on yourself. And that would happen a lot at RISD. I'd get students who were just so frustrated because their work wasn't coming out good, or they would be like, oh man, I'm not making any progress. And they would whine and whine and whine. And Jordan never did that. Never whined, never complained, worked so hard, was always willing. And I was like, okay, he is something. Not a lot of people are like that. I'm gonna give a shout out to Sonnet. Thank you so much for the super chat, who says, I love to see how much Art Prof has grown. You are all so essential to so many of us. We need you. Thank you so much, Sonnet. Paula F says, I'd love to have Jordan as a student for his bright smile. I know we can't live without his smile. Art Prof is a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And please join me in the Art Prof Discord. I will be in the post live streams channel so we can chat more about whatever you want to chat about. Subscribe to our channel so you can continue to grow and develop as an artist. And a big thank you to our top Patreon supporters. It is so incredible to have your support, and all of you who contribute to the discussion, who call me Empress, all those things, contribute to Art Prof in one way or another. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.